Good morning. Good morning. It's Charmaine Hammond, and I'm really excited to be here today talking about crowdfunding for nonprofits. This is such an entirely big topic. I can tell you, Victoria Bennett, who is our expert today that we're bringing on the webinar, I actually met her through a friend of mine, Catherine, in Calgary. We have a mutual friend. Hi, Catherine, if you're listening. And Catherine is my go-to source for social media, and she's rescued me from some Facebook stalker problems and things that I had that I didn't know how to fix. And so when I was talking to her one day about, I need to do a webinar on crowdfunding because I get asked all the time by my nonprofit clients, what is crowdfunding? How do you do it? Where do you start? How do you make it a success? And I said, well, we'll bring on an expert. So Catherine, who is just an amazing connector, introduced me to Victoria, and here we are 1 month later, 2 months later. So again, I'm Charmaine Hammond. I'm a professional speaker and author, and I do a lot of work with businesses and organizations to help them with leadership, resilience, and building strong, healthy teams. And I also work with a lot of nonprofits. I've been on nonprofit boards before. I've been on committees that are run by nonprofits. I have a real deep passion about making nonprofits, social profits, successful in everything that they do because they perform such important work in the community. Now, today's webinar is hosted by an organization I love, Fuse Social, and they're in Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada, and they provide wonderful services and support to the social profit organizations in Fort McMurray. They're leaders in innovation and collaboration, and they have been playing a real pivotal role in the rebuilding and the resilience building of Fort McMurray. As many of you know, Fort McMurray was devastated with forest fires in May of this year. And I'm a resident of Fort McMurray, not now, but I was for 15 years. And one thing I know for sure about that community is how strong and resilient they are and how they pull together as a community. And Fuse Social is working extensively with the social profit organizations to help them be resilient. Now, many organizations might be looking at crowdfunding as a way to propel their fundraising goals or to even get their message out to the world. So let me dive in and introduce you to Victoria. She has so much to say. This is going to be action-packed. Get your notepad. And the good news is, yes, we are recording this, so you can listen to Victoria's beautiful voice over and over and over again. Victoria Bennett ran her first successful crowdfunding campaign over 3 years ago, and this was for a nonprofit organization, a long time in crowdfunding years, a strategic partner by training. She's worked with some really, really major brands, and you've heard of these brands, Pampers, Tide, and Max and TD. And she's used her skills as a marketer to identify the value that the organization or the product provides, and then targets the market, answers the so what, and then communicates clearly, effectively, and consistently to the crowd. These are all skills that are vital to any crowdfunding campaign. Now, she's currently consulting with a champagne crowdfund campaign. That sounds very interesting. And that's in the US, a wearable technology device, and it's just closed the successful chocolate campaign in Calgary. Now, welcome to the webinar today, Victoria. It's so great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. It's great to be here.
Well, I know you. Go ahead, sorry.
I always enjoy the opportunity to share talking about crowdfunding because it is just such a game changer. And, it's something everybody should consider. It's not right for everybody, but I think everybody should consider in whatever organization they are. And I just love the opportunity to be able to share them some knowledge.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. And there's a lot, you and I talked offline, and there's so many things that organizations and even entrepreneurs listening. This was something really cool that you taught me the other day, Victoria, when we were talking. You said, even though a crowdfunding campaign might look a little different for an entrepreneur versus a nonprofit organization, a lot of the fundamentals are the same. So what I love is what we're going to be talking about can be replicated in different industries and different types of organizations. And I just love that. So what did we miss about you? Is there anything else before we dive into the content that you want to add?
No, I think the other thing is, at the moment I'm currently on 4 boards. There's 1 charity and 3 nonprofits. So, I can probably, give some very good examples that would be relevant to everybody on the call today. But what I am interested to know is who is on the call today, so that I can actually target the messaging and make it as relevant as possible. So if you're able to hop on the chat room and just put a little note in to say the type of not-for-profit you are, that would be brilliant.
Wonderful. And while people are doing that, I'll just let you know that some of the nonprofits that I know couldn't be here today. They're off holiday, which is a good thing in August. We have several animal shelters and rescue organizations. So we have nonprofits in the animal industry, a couple that are very small. I think it was under 5 employees. And then the other was quite large, I think about 25, 30 employees, both longtime nonprofits. And then we have a lot of nonprofits in the social and community services realm. So groups that work with children, groups that provide parenting type support, groups that provide awareness on crisis intervention, mental health, and working with high-risk youth. And then we also have a couple of organizations that are working in the seniors area. Again, they're nonprofit, one providing more social type programming, and then the other providing more health related programming. So if there's anyone else on the chat room that has another area that you're working in, or I know we actually have some entrepreneurs that are also listening and are going to be listening to the replay. They just registered. So I hope that helps, Victoria. And as I see people come in, I'll add that.
Sounds good. Excellent.
Okay, let's dive in. First question, let's all get on the same page, because I think lots of us know little bits about crowdfunding. People who have been involved in it probably have a much bigger perspective. But so why don't you start off by telling us what crowdfunding is, so we all have the same perspective.
Absolutely. And often people think, wow, crowdfunding, this is a new thing. But when you think about it, something like the Statue of Liberty was crowdfunded, because a group of people got together, put a bit of money together, and that's what actually paid for the Statue of Liberty to come over and be installed in New York. So crowdfunding has been around for a long time. The main concept is it's getting a crowd together to each put in small or smaller amounts of money, and that's usually facilitated by technology. So you've probably heard of things like the platforms. So you may have heard of Kickstarter or Indiegogo or GoFundMe. So there's all these platforms out there, and they facilitate actually collecting the money and sharing the information. And then there's also different types of crowdfunding. So there are multiple different types of crowdfunding. There's debt crowdfunding, there's equity crowdfunding, where you actually give up part of the equity of your business to move forward. The ones that we're going to focus on today are going to be things like the peer-to-peer, which would be much more of a sort of the donations, the GoFundMe, and so those are sort of the donation based. So you don't typically give rewards, but you provide help, support, and goodwill. And then the reward-based. So these are non-financial rewards. So the ones that people may have seen as the big cooler, the coolest cooler in the world, which had played music and everything. So it allows you to get products before they come out into the marketplace. So
Gotcha. Okay. And what about with crowdfunding? I guess one question I have is, you mentioned lots of platforms. What are some of the platforms? I think I might have just lost Victoria here. We'll see if we can get her back. Okay, we might just be having a little technical difficulty. For those of you that are on the platform, if you can hear me, if you can type into the chat box, I can hear you, Charmaine, and we'll work at getting Victoria back. Now, with crowdfunding, while we're waiting for Victoria, I'll let you know, I was actually involved in a crowdfunding campaign, oh gosh, probably 2 or 3 years ago, and this crowdfunding was phenomenal. They used is it Kickstarter, I think. So Victoria, we've got you back. Welcome back, Robin. No problem. Hey, that's what happens with technology. I just love that we can be connected. You're in Calgary and I'm in Vancouver, and we can do this together with people all over the world. So can you give us an idea of some of the platforms that are currently being used? I know lots of people have probably heard of is it Kickstarter or Kickstarter? I get that mixed up. Now, why are we not hearing Victoria? Oh, there we go. Sorry, we had you on mute or something. Can you say that again, Victoria?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Wonderful. So yes, so Kickstarter and Indiegogo are probably the two most well-known platforms out there. So the Kickstarter has always had a bit of a technology bent. You've got to be slightly further along. But actually, in reality, one of the things I find fascinating is they have on average a 35% success rate. So 35% of campaigns are successful, 65% are not successful. And we'll go into it later, but mainly it's due to planning and lack of a crowd. There's a clue in the name, crowdfunding. But although it's always thought as a technology platform, in reality, only about 19% of campaigns are successful on Kickstarter, so of the technology ones. The ones that are successful are in the art space, in the theatre space, in the creative space. So that was why I was interested to know who was on the call, because if there's anybody out there not-for-profit in those spaces, you can the success rate of those is about 60%. So
wow.
really, yeah, much more successful in those areas. So there's that side. But the one with that is you have to set a target and you have to hit the target. If you don't hit the target, you don't get any money. So that's just an interesting one. So with Indiegogo, the way that they work is that you can set a target. If you don't hit the target, you don't get the money. But you can also set a target, and if you don't get the money, it's a fixed target, or if you don't get the target, you still get the money. Just a watch out for that one. With Indiegogo, if you set a target, say $10,000, and you only raise $8,000, if you're building something and you need $10,000, $8,000 is futile. So that's when you go for a fixed funding. You know, if having some of the money is going to help the project, you might have to rejig the project a bit. You can do those ones where you can accept smaller money, but to do the whole project is going to need the 10,000. Then you need to go for the fixed funding. So there are many platforms out there, and sometimes that platform selection, it can be a bit bewildering. I actually quite like sticking with those two, with the rewards, simply because they're the biggest ones. The downside to that is, I think today there are 4,600 campaigns live on Kickstarter. So you've got to stand out from the crowd there as well. So you just got to do that. The other one, sort of looking at the more peer-to-peer, I mean, many people have seen GoFundMe, and that's fantastic. If you want, you know, we've all seen something's happened and you need an instant response, they're quick to set up, and you can actually get campaigns up and running. And I think my last donation to GoFundMe was yesterday. So, you know, it's really easy to set up and run. You can also use it for running campaigns. You still got to do the structure, you still got to do the setup, but it's one that I think people feel mainstream. And that's one thing to think about with your donors, is some of your donors, this may be the first time they've ever been on a crowdfunding platform, and so they've got to feel a comfort level. So that's one of the other reasons why I suggest going with the main ones. One other one I'd like to just mention at this time is one called CauseVox, and that is that's CAUSEVOX. And that's specially designed for not-for-profits. So, you know, the fee structure is slightly less, and they're very much geared up for it. They have lots of tools on there to help you. So, you know, it is very specific for not-for-profits, which is good. And it has all the tools, but it may not be as mainstream, because what you're asking people to do is to put a credit card detail in online, and that's, you know, not everyone's always comfortable with that. You know, some people feel safer with a check in the post. So, you know, I think you have to think about, you know, your donors and what's the right thing for them. But those would be the ones that I would certainly consider. Lots of other ones out there, and you know, if you've got any questions at the end, we can definitely chat about them.
Perfect. Yes. And for those of you that are watching live, you can certainly type your questions in the chat box. If you're watching later on the replay, I've enabled the chat or the question box, so you can put your question in and I can get that to Victoria. And you know what? We'll answer it on Facebook, so you can all get the benefit of the answer. I know that a lot of times, Victoria, you would see this all the time, that once people start planning their crowdfunding, that's when all the questions come up. So now people soak in the information, and then as they sit down and start it, that's when I know the questions will come up. One thing that I really want to ask at this point, and I want to capture, it sounds like when we're considering a crowdfunding for our nonprofit or even for our business, we have to first of all make that decision on what platform is best for us. So you've really identified, you have to look at the goals of your crowdfunding, who your audience is, their comfort level with technology, your crowd. I know one gal that can't be on live today, but she was saying when they do crowdfunding, so they have a seniors organization, and she said, you know, her audience, her client group wouldn't be on crowdfunding. Some of them are on Facebook to follow their grandkids and on email, but funding is not their method. However, their kids are on crowdfunding, so they changed the branding, the look of the crowdfunding graphics and video to appeal to the families of the seniors that they serve. And I thought that was an important distinction, because had they been promoting just to seniors, their crowdfunding could have failed. And you shared those stats. Those are actually staggering stats, by the way, of how many crowdfunding initiatives fail. So could we talk about where are some of the failure points, and then what they need to do as an organization to start taking the idea of crowdfunding into planning it?
Yeah, absolutely. Really good question. So I think the first thing is crowdfunding right for you? So some questions that you need to be thinking is, you know, can you tell a story around it? So do you have a specific project or something that you're raising for? And can you tell a story about it that can be shared and that people can engage with? You know, that's one of the things. If there's, people have to connect with it. And so can you create that behind whatever project you're working on? So if you're wanting to raise a specific amount to run a new support mechanism, say in a certain area, so we need to hire somebody and we need to do this and get the space, and so we need to have, you know, $20,000. Can you actually tell the story about, you know, who it's going to be targeting, you know, what it's going to do, what difference it's going to make? What's your network like? So with your donors, do you actually have your donors today? Do you have their emails? You know, how do you contact them? How do you reach out to them? Do you have a social media network? So I think the things you've got to think about is, what's your email list look like? You know, what about your partners? So who are the other agencies that you work with that perhaps you can share with? You know, who are the suppliers you have? Think about those, you know, that you could share with. Your social media network. So Twitter is the main medium, I will say, for campaigns, but that doesn't preclude any other one. And I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, if you're thinking that your donors are actually going to come from a younger age range, set up an Instagram or Snapchat account. It's not that scary. And actually send the messaging out through there. And then you think about everybody else. So you have to think about who's your crowd. And I will go, hopefully we can go later into the different ways of creating a crowd. Who are you actually targeting? So who's going to be donating to your cause? Because it may be that this is one that is for a youth one. If you look at the average age of a crowdfunder, so somebody who backs a crowdfunding campaign, they're aged between 28 and 40. The bit that probably everyone's going to get very excited about, typically they earn over $100,000 US dollars. So they typically are wealthier people, and they're very technology savvy. So I can see everyone getting excited about that. But that gives you an idea of who's typically, yeah. But if you look at the Kickstarter and Indiegogo backer, that's typically who was backing it. Slightly different with the things like the GoFundMe or the CauseVox, but you know, if you're wanting to target somebody, you know, in their 60s, this may not be the best mechanism to do so. There are lots of silver surfers out there, but you might want to be, if you're doing a campaign that's wanting to touch people who are in their 30s and 40s, this may be a better mechanism. Can you clearly articulate how you're going to spend the money? One of the things I often say to people, and I do coffee with people probably about once a week to talk about crowdfunding. So this is like me doing coffee with lots of people today. And I have to say I do kill quite a lot of projects from a crowdfunding point of view. And the reason that I kill them is because you need to be very authentic and transparent. Now, most not-for-profits are very authentic. I mean, that's why you do it. We're all passionate about our volunteer or our business, our roles in the not-for-profits. But you also have to be very transparent. So you have to say, we've invested this money to date to do this project. This is how we're going to, we need to raise this amount of money, and this is how we're going to spend it. If you're not prepared to be absolutely precise about where the money's going, if you're thinking, oh, this is an easy way to raise money, and we'll raise 15,000 and 10,000 will go for this campaign, but 5,000 will actually go and pay because we needed somebody to help us out in the office. That's not the way to do it. You have to be very clear. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it down to the absolute cent. You might, quite often people do it like a pie chart, and it's, this is for the, this section is for us to get the space, and this section is for us to get to hire people, and we need resources. So those sort of things that you can do them as sort of like a pie chart, but you still have to tell people exactly how you're going to spend the money.
That's important.
Yeah, very, very important. The other thing is, timelines. So sometimes people think this is quick money. And I will say on something like GoFundMe, if you've got an emergency need, you need to get money in quick, it's a mechanism to do so. You've just got to rally the troops very rapidly. But typically, I work on a 90-day program prior to a campaign. So I work through sort of 90 to 60 days, you need to do this. 60 to 30 days, you need to do this. 30 to 0, you need to do this during your campaign. And a campaign, the most successful ones around that 30 to 45 day one. The reason being is you get most of your money in the first 3 days and the last 3 days. That middle is actually a bit of a, so you don't want to leave it too far apart, because it's a bit of you want to get people going, my golly, it's closing, I better get in there quick. So you don't want to have it too long. So 30 to 45 days is typically the length that you would want to run a campaign. And then it usually takes another 2 weeks afterwards before you get the money. Well, if you add that together, that's 4.5 months. Right. So if it's not a quick fix for money. You do need to actually be planning a bit of a way out to actually get the money in. So that's another thing that sometimes people think, oh, we're going to do this, but they don't realize, rallying the troops may take some time. And also in a not-for-profit, often the boards are very active. The board will want to know what's going on, and they want to approve it, because this may be something very different. And sometimes that first time is the one where they want to do it. Once you've done it and it's been successful, it's probably a quick item in a meeting. But prior to that, so they may want to have a bit more due diligence. So you need to factor that in with your not-for-profit as well.
Great.
So I'm trying to think, is there anything else that we should add in? Oh, ask me another question. I'm sure I can add it in.
Well, I love what you're saying here, the planning, and that's one of the things you had said offline is where most crowdfundings fail is lack of planning. They don't have a crowd, and it's sort of some organizations that I know that have tried crowdfunding where it didn't really reach the mark, or one group that actually used, I think it was Kickstarter, and they didn't reach the money, so they didn't get any, and they put all this time in. And so when they started to do a review and learn and look at, what went well, what were the challenges, what did we learn, what will we do differently, what they were saying is that they kind of had this mindset where if you build it, they will come and press, yes, I support you. And so they would kind of have a tweet going out a day and maybe a Facebook post. And then as they were not seeing the money coming in, then there was sort of this massive flurry of just, donate now, donate now. But So what was happening is they were losing people from their crowd because now they weren't telling their story. It was just all about please donate. And so people weren't sort of resonating with that heartfelt story and wanting to say, oh gosh, I just love what you're doing. I have to support you. And that was the big learning that one of the nonprofits shared with me. And I thought it was important for us to consider because, you know, their big takeaway was that crowdfunding is also about relationships. And you know, relationships isn't just the donate now button. Now, the other piece I'm going to add, I think we might have lost Victoria here. I'm just going to see if we can get her back. We're having technology challenges today. I'm also going to mention, I think, a couple from public libraries too. So I'm going to mention that to Victoria because she mentioned something about the arts, and I was really excited about that, to hear that. So I really want to hear what was going on with the arts. And Victoria, I see you're back. I was going to mention, I was just in the chat room and I see we actually have a couple, I know offline and online, we have a couple of people that are in the arts. We have a couple of people that work with, yeah, with public libraries and arts programs. So there you go. Maybe before today you can address that as well.
Excellent.
So with planning, let's go into planning, because that was one of the big challenges you said organizations need to go through. So they kind of they pick their time frame, they pick their platform. What else? What are a few tips you could offer in that sort of that 30, 60, 90-day scenario? And I know you have we'll talk later, you have a system actually that people can use that shows them what to do. But for those that are on with us today, if you can give us an idea of some of those tasks that we have to start planning for.
Absolutely. So I think the key thing we have to think about is who's going to do this. Usually in not-for-profits, we're all scrabbling to try and, you know, get stuff done. And so that's one thing, is you really need to have at least one person who's dedicated to this. And if if you're doing a larger campaign, then I would actually recommend, you know, if your budget to actually stretch to having somebody who can manage it for you. Otherwise, this is the tool, which is the one that Charmaine's referencing. I have a tool here that actually walks you through what you can do, and there'll be a link at the end for it. But the key thing behind it is you need the people to actually do the work. And I think there's a bit like I said, you need to have the time, you also need to have the people. It isn't a quick fix, it isn't an easy fix. There is also another halo. Not only do you raise the money, but you also raise your profile. So that's a bit of another reason to do it. So the first thing you really need to look at is, you know, when you start your project plan, do you have social media in place? Because you're looking at how to develop your crowd. So, you know, social media does take a wee while to get going. So if you don't have a Twitter account or a Facebook page, you know, now might be the time to do it, and to try and engage people and to get your message out there. The next thing is going through your email lists. Now, many people do have their email lists all in one place and use a tool like Constant Contact or MailChimp. If you don't, now's a good time to do so, because you want to keep communicating with these people to let them know that you're running a campaign, let them know what the objectives are, and then also let them know when the campaign's live, that it is live, because one of the keys to success, and we talked about, you know, there are 4,600 campaigns out there on Kickstarter today. If you actually get 10% of your target in that first day of the campaign going live, that actually clicks a little algorithm. It used to be a human, but I believe it's an algorithm. And now they will start emailing everybody on their list to say, hey, this campaign's doing really well. So it gives you additional publicity. So that's one of the reasons why we get our email lists in order, so that we can to very clearly what we call a call to action, so that they will sign up on the first day, and also make it easy for them to share with their friends and family, to say, you know, please back this. And when they share with their friends and family, they make it personal to them. Please follow this. You know, I'd really like you to support this because this is a cause close to my heart because of X, Y, Z. And that sort of endorsement is huge. So, that's why the email lists are really good, because it's easy for them to forward it on. Have a look at other campaigns that are online. I mean, I did a bit of research to see what sort of not-for-profit campaigns are on at the moment. There's a Bellingham Beer Lab, brewing for a cause. There's an Australian Weathercam, which is a network to monitor local weather and storms. And it was really interesting to see sort of some of the campaigns that are out there. Look at the ones that are successful. Look at the ones that have failed. You can learn a lot for them. When you're looking at things like your social media, once you set up your accounts, look at ways of managing those accounts. So actually, to make it as timely as possible. So in Canada, we have a system called Hootsuite. It's available around the globe now. But it actually allows you to plan all your social media posts at the start of the week. So, I've done, for one of my not-for-profits, on a Sunday night, I spend an hour with a glass of wine in my hand. Should I say that, really? And I set schedule. I'm honest. I schedule all the posts for the week, and then it's done. People think it can be very time-consuming. Now, when you're actually running the campaign, it does tend to be more time-consuming because you need to be able to respond to people in real time. But certainly when you're building up that list of followers, that's a good time to do it. The other thing you can do then is look for influencers. So look for people who talk a lot in your space. One of the things that often people forget about is if what you're doing is really relevant to a famous person. So try and find out, if you're in the mental health space, is there somebody, a famous actor who either, is suffering at the moment or has friends or family who are suffering, where it's a very personal cause? Because often people find that, they're asked to tweet about, the brand of jeans that they're wearing or the sneakers that they're wearing. And actually what they really want to talk about is a cause that's close to their heart. So it's worthwhile spending a bit of time and finding somebody like that and reaching out to them, because if it resonates with them, they will retweet it. And how powerful would that be to have somebody with 100,000 followers, 1 million followers, tweeting out your campaign? So that's just a little bit of a tip there, because often these famous people are sick and tired of tweeting out what they've been told to tweet out because they're going to get paid for it. They actually want to tweet and talk about stuff that's really relevant to them.
Great.
Guessing that most of you probably have a website already, but one of the things that you can actually do is on your landing page, on your home page, you can actually say that, put something about the campaign on there. So before the campaign, you might want to put something up, but then definitely when the campaign's up and running, because often people will just check you out and you want to let them know. Or the other way, if they're going to your website but don't know you're running a campaign, when they see it very clearly on your front page, then they may well go through and actually sign up. So I'm just thinking, so one of the other things to look at is blogging. So people want to know that if they're putting their money in, especially a not-for-profit, what's it going to do? So if you're, I know we've got a couple of entrepreneurs on there, so you can talk about, say, a product that you're developing and what difference it's going to make. If you're a dog shelter, for example, you can talk about some success stories, having the pictures of, some poor dog coming in and then leaving with a happy new owner and a forever home. So, start doing those stories and really, really trying to engage people that way. The other thing is look at other blogs that, and I'm not saying jump on them and own them, but start chatting in them. So actually putting comments on blogs that are relevant. So we talked about partners. So you might even want to say to them, hey, I'm going to be sort of putting more comments on that. It's because, I'm raising awareness for my campaign as well, just so that they know what you're trying to do. The other thing is, you need to get in there with the media. So thinking about your PR efforts. So do you have a friendly reporter that you can reach out to? One of the services that I subscribe to is called HARO, and it's help a reporter out. Now, it's a bit of a pain because every morning you get this list of like 400 questions from reporters, and you have to go through it. But when you find something that is absolutely relevant to you or your campaign, then you reach out to them and say, hey, I can talk about this, and you give them stuff. And they go, wow, this is wonderful. And then they print it. And so it's, sometimes people find it tough to get stuff into the media. But this is a chance for you to actually interact with media literally on a daily basis. One thing I will say is I would absolutely do a press release. And with press releases, keep it simple. Media nowadays, everyone's saying this, everyone in the media is losing their jobs. So you're finding that there's fewer and fewer people still having to cover probably even more news than before. So make it easy for them. Very simple title, find a hook. Why is it relevant for them? I talked about that, the dog shelter. So with the dog shelter, can you say things like, I'm in Calgary, so we have, we've lost a huge number of jobs in Calgary, and a lot of people can't afford to keep their pets anymore. So it's another angle on the job loss story. So that's a hook that the media might find interesting, is, that we've lost, X number of jobs in Calgary, and the impact has been all these animals now have no homes. And so they're doing this campaign specifically to raise money to build extra spaces, or to have a special day for dog adoption. So that's the sort of thing where you've got to find that hook that the media is going to be really interested in. The other thing is help them. Give them all the background so they can literally cut and paste from your press release into their newspaper. They don't need to worry about anything else. So give them the background, who you are, why this is important, and do it. I always do it in smaller font at the bottom so people realize it's not necessarily part of the press release, but it's there. It saves them having to Google you. It's already there. It's already written. You've really helped them out. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. I did one recently, a crowdfunding campaign, and I wanted to get it in the local media. It was about chocolate. So I went down to the Calgary Herald with a few bars of chocolate, and I hand-delivered the press release with the bars of chocolate. Guess what happened? I was in the business section the next week. So I'm not sure if you can I'm not sure if you can take a dog down and do that. But, I suppose you could do, and let them play with the dog and stuff like that. So, really, really help these guys out. I mean, media is having a tough time at the moment. So if you make it easy for them, then they're more likely to cover you. I'm just thinking what else we should add into there.
And what about newsletters? I know I'm just going to use an example because I got a newsletter from them last week. I always read the newsletters from the Fort McMurray Public Library because they're chock full of good information, and I keep in touch with the community I used to live in. And so I'm just going to use them as an example. I love how, their newsletter, for example, talks about literacy for kids. It talks about programs that are going on in the community that they're involved with, any events that they've got coming up. So when you're doing your crowdfunding, would newsletters be important as well, leading way up? Or that might be relating what you're saying about the database. So newsletters is important too. Okay.
Absolutely. I think newsletters and emails, any of that where you can actually get it. And the other advantage is, as I said, that people can then forward it and they can then share it. So that's huge. The key thing is you need to be very clear about what your objectives are. So you need to very clearly say, now a newsletter is an audience that knows you, emails an audience that knows you, but you still think about, who are you? What is it that you actually do? You've got to think about why people would support your campaign. Why would they support your campaign over anybody else's campaign? Because you've got to differentiate yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's important, the whole differentiating yourself and standing out. And sometimes with newsletters and email lists too, sometimes with newsletters and email lists, especially for people with really, really big lists, there might be people that are not in touch with that organization all the time. So, or a lot of times people don't, like, if a lot of people get so many emails, they're just unsubscribing. So what I'm really taking away from you, Victoria, that is just critical, I kind of picture this piece of paper almost like as a wheel with all these spokes coming out. And in terms of getting your message out there, there are so many musts. There's media, social media, email, newsletters, word of mouth, getting your champions, sort of finding your support, blogging on other people's blogs, doing videos, doing live streams, all those things that help you build your crowd, as you said.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things you mentioned, videos. Video is core to the actual campaign. Almost every platform requires you to do a video. So yeah, it doesn't, one of the things we did with the Calgary Boys Choir, which was the very first crowdfunding campaign I did, we actually chose to have a high school student do our video. Now he's now down in LA studying film production. So he was pretty good, but it wasn't perfect. And I think that's one of the things in the not-for-profit space. You want to look good, but you don't want to look too good. Because then you actually look like you have enough money, and why are you raising money in the first place? So, but with a video, it's that, you know, the whole picture tells 1,000 words. Well, a video tells 1,000 words every second. So, you know, videos are incredibly powerful. You should have probably your executive director or somebody senior sort of doing the introduction, and you should just literally walk through, you know, what the questions we said before, what you're raising money for, how much you're raising, and what you're going to do with it. What's the impact out of it? And it's, people question how long that video should be. And I think that the data says it should be about 2 minutes. However, there are some very successful campaigns that have done 10-minute videos. And the most important thing is hooking people in that first second. Because if they don't sort of think, oh, well, this looks appealing, this looks interesting to me, they'll just stop the video and they won't see your message. So one of the clients I've worked with, they started off with their logo and it slowly came up on the screen. And I'm like, next video. Because I'm not interested in your logo. No disrespect to people's logos, and I'm sure they're beautiful. I want to see straight away something that is going to be appealing to me. Why should I watch this video? So think really carefully about those first few seconds that it will grab people, that people actually know, yeah, this looks interesting and I'm going to stick with it and I'm going to watch it. And then you can do a 10-minute video, because people have engaged in those first few minutes and they want to stay for the whole time.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on video because I agree with you. It's such an important platform for your organization or business, for the entrepreneurs, not even with crowdfunding, just in terms of how you build your crowd and how you build your audience and engagement. And one example, the very first crowdfunding I ever knew about or was involved with was for my friend, Dr. Sean Duperrin, and she has a initiative called Project Forgive. And so she was so helpful and authentic with people after the crowdfunding. She did sort of a Q&A video to share with people what she learned about the crowdfunding process, what they do differently, what worked well. And she talked about video. And I recall Dr. Sean saying that the first video they had up just sort of wasn't quite there. It wasn't landing and hitting the mark. And they redid the video. And I'll tell you the honest truth, I watched the video, I watched it, the campaign was 3 years ago, and I've still gone on and watched the video when I'm having a bad day, because I have this little segment where she says, we wanted to know about forgiveness, so we went and asked the experts. So we're expecting to see all these scholars, and there's like little 4-year-old kids talking about what they think forgiveness is. And one of them says, forgiveness just feels good in your heart. Oh, you know, I had the tear, and I feel so connected to the project because of the authenticity of those little kids. And it was so well done, and just really, and so I've watched it many times, you know, if I just need to pick me up, because the kids are just so great. So I really get what you're saying about video. And I think it's a very powerful lesson we can learn, as not just for crowdfunding, but as we go through our day-to-day in our organization or business.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, you know, one of the things that we have to think about video is that people often think it's very expensive to do. And I mean, there is a cost for running a campaign. So you have to think there's platform fees, which are typically around 5%. The cause box, I think, are lower. And actually, if you're raising less than 5,000, I don't think there are any. Plus, you have the fees for PayPal or Swipe, which can be 3% plus 30 cents per item, or 3 to 5%. 5%. So you are, that's a bit of money you have to factor in. And then you have to factor in doing the video, which is one of the other reasons why I say, if you can do it in-house. But also think about things like using Periscope. If you've got an event going on, sort of filming some of that. There's lots of different ways of doing it. So just keep that in mind. The other thing you have to think about is, are you going to give a reward? So often if it's for a good cause, then, especially on the GoFundMe, people aren't expecting to get anything back. But if it's on the rewards platforms, people are expecting to get something back. But would it be perhaps a personal letter from the executive director or a board member? Is it sharing a day in the life? Could it be things like actually getting a letter from somebody who's benefited from it? Things like that. I mentioned the Australian weather cam one before. So that was a network to monitor local weather and storms. And depending on the amount you gave, you've got more points to vote for where these 15 new weather cams are going to be. So if you gave, I think I think it was Australian dollars, you got 1 vote. And if you gave, 50, you got 2 votes. So that was how they did it. So you just got more votes to where the weather camera. So if you really wanted one on your back doorstep, you put lots of money and you get more votes. So you've got to be creative with those things. We always have, little trinkets that we give away. So that may be something that you want to do. But there is a cost then, and you also have the shipping cost to bear in mind. What we did with the Calgary Boys Choir was we wrote notes from the boys to say thank you for making their 40th anniversary concert free. And we had little pictures, and then we just sent those out. So that was what we did. But if you look at some of the other campaigns, the things that you might do is actually giving away an item or inviting them to a party. Perhaps your next fundraiser, if you have, tickets, somebody who's donated over $1,000, they could have tickets to to your next big fundraiser. That's the perceived value of that's greater than the actual value that you're giving forward. So those are things you've got to think about when you're doing your different levels.
Wow. So we're getting close to our time. Holy smokes. I have I've been typing some of the tips that I'm hearing in the chat box. So we have those for our blog after, because we're going to do a blog about this. Some great information, Victoria. One question that came up from someone that couldn't be on live today, but I said I would ask it, is when a group is planning, is there any sort of amount of money that's better to do a campaign for than, like, their question was sort of, if we just, would I be safer or more successful if I did a $5,000 campaign, or if I did $100,000, would that look too big and people wouldn't want to support? I thought that was a great question. They're a small nonprofit, I think about 15 people, she said.
Yeah, so I mean, on Kickstarter, they have raised over 2.5 billion. So there's a lot of money in the pool, and people start thinking of the sort of the big ones. There's only 185 campaigns that have raised over $1 million. The most successful projects raise under $10,000. Okay. So I would say is the one. Especially if you're doing an all or nothing campaign, being under that 10,000 is success. Would raise your chances of success. But the other side to it is, if you want to raise more, do you have the structure in place to raise more? So have a look, if you've ever raised online, have a look at, how much you've raised before. Have a look how many donors you had before. Have a look what the average donation is. And that might give you a good idea. So if you look at, we had 100 people and they each donated $50, well, that gives me an indication of how much I could get. But that was perhaps a different mechanism. So then you need to think, okay, how do I grow my crowd? you know, because I know that what I'm offering, there's bigger interest and bigger group. So how do I grow my crowd so that I can actually expand it? So that will give you a really good starting point. But if you know, well, actually, I'm going to need to raise more than 5,000, then what you would do is you would then look at, okay, well, I actually need to raise 25,000. How can I grow my crowd fivefold so that I can actually get that? And so that's when you start to look at it. So I often look at, you know, say to everybody, say to the board members, say to the employees, say to the volunteers, you know, can you give me you know, all the list of everybody that we've been talking to. So you've always got to be careful. And I know some people are south of the border here or probably abroad. In Canada, we have a thing called CASL, which is the anti-spam. So you have to have a relationship with people before you use their email addresses. They have to opt in and they have to have a mechanism to opt out. It's one of the reasons why I like some of the, you know, MailChimp and things like that, because they do a lot of that for you. So, you know, you might want to put something on your website so that people can say, you know, if you're interested to actually sign up for that. You can pull together everybody's emails. Have a look at how many contacts you have. With the email ones, you're going to get a higher chance of success because they're closer to you. You actually know them. You know, with your people who are in social media, you're going to have a lower chance of success. So if you work out, you know, on average, and put all your names together, you're going to have 1% conversion. So if I need to have 500 people, then, you know, I need to have 50,000 people in my database. So that will give you an idea. So if I know I need to have 500 people, you know, each donating $50, then I need to have contact with 50,000 people. So it's, you know, it does give you a bit of an idea to work out how we're going to be successful.
And the other question I had, for groups, is there platforms, if you have a group in the arts, like an arts council, or in the literary field, a library nonprofit, is there platforms that are better for people in the arts versus entrepreneur sector or, say, animal rescue sector?
Yeah, there are thousands of platforms out there. So, you know, I'm based in Alberta. So one of the ones that I'd want to mention here is ATB, Alberta Treasury Branch, which is the government's bank, have a crowdfunding platform. It's the only bank in the world to have its own crowdfunding platform called Alberta Booster. And yeah, I know, it's super cool. And so they, that's good for sort of geographically specific. So if you're in Alberta, they do events and that you get to pitch at the events, and it's a super cool thing. So definitely look that at Alberta Booster. It's spelled B-O-O-S-T and a capital R. So just you say that because if you Google it, it might not come up. So I would say geographically there are ones. There's definitely ones. I mean, for animals, I know that there's a specific one down in the States. So, you know, yes, there definitely are, and I'm sure if you Google them, you could find them. You have to think about, is your thing mainstream? In which case, you know, the Kickstarter and Indiegogo goes, or is it something that you think, hey, you know, this is a library-specific one, and I'm sure other people interested in libraries would be interested in it. In which case, go for a very targeted one. The other thing is, you know, sometimes I've seen people switch platforms. So, you know, I've seen people do things, say, on Indiegogo and haven't had the greatest success, and then they've freshened it up and then they've put it on Kickstarter. And it often isn't actually the platform that makes a difference, because, as I said before, actually, no, I don't know if I said this before, my apologies. So 30% of your backers come from people you know. The next 30% come from people they know, which is why it's important to make it easy for them to tell other people. And then 30% come from people you don't know. So that could come from your platform, but it could also come from, you know, people through the press, etc. So if you're thinking about, you know, your which platform you're on, you're actually bringing 60% of those people to that platform. So in many ways, the platform is less important. You check things like, you know, does it have the right fees? Is the fee structure right for you? You know, does it, what's the support it gives you? If you can't afford to do a video, don't go for a platform that requires you to do a video. You know, I think actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. So, wow, what a pile of amazing information here. I've got a ton of notes in the chat box. And like I said, we'll be doing some blogs about this and some articles to kind of pull the points together. And there was some links that Victoria mentioned for the different platforms. Alberta Booster by ATB. Wow, that was great. I know I have lots of Alberta people listening today on the webinar, so make sure you check out Alberta Booster. And it was Boost with a capital R. And we'll get all these points summarized into a blog and an article. And what I'll also do is put the link to the resource that Victoria mentioned, which is that whole planning tool. That will come to you in the follow-up resources and with the replay link as well, because I know that a lot of you are going to listen to this over and over again. It might be something you also share with your board or your planning team that are working with crowdfunding. Victoria, wow, you just shared so much value with us today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And there is a lot to it, but it's basically, you know, be very focused, tell your story, and you know, make sure you share it, grow your crowd, share it with your crowd, and wish you every success.
Oh, thank you. And we'll be putting Victoria's social media platforms as well in the follow-up so that you can follow her, because I always say if you want to learn what's going on, follow the people who know about it. So follow Victoria, and you'll see her actually on her Twitter and stuff, where she actually comments on different platforms and raises questions. So by following her, you'll really stay in touch with current information, because I think with crowdfunding, we have to be up to date. We can't use what we knew a year ago, because the platforms that we use to support, even look at social media, there's a new platform every day for us to learn about. So Victoria, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I think this is a conversation we're going to have to definitely have again. And to all of you who joined us live, thank you for showing up today. If you're listening to the replay, thank you for listening. Again, you can email. There's a place where you can email your questions. You can put them on the Facebook event page as well, and we'll make sure we get them to you. And to Fuse Social, big thank you for all that you're doing to support the social profit organizations and hosting a series of webinars to provide great value to groups. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the summer. Thanks, Victoria.
Bye.